Let's move to our next discussion on driving meaningful digital strategy. We're living in an age of what I call digital chaos. A crisis demands boldness and learning, and now is the time to reassess digital initiatives. Organizations are dabbling in new social media platforms, developing emails that hopefully people open, and trying to create content that people view and by some miracle share before swiping up or down on their smartphone. The problem is that often there's no method to the madness. COVID 19 seemingly provided a sudden glimpse into a future world, one in which digital has become central to every interaction, forcing both organizations and individuals further up the adoption curve almost overnight. We have a very interesting lineup of experts today on our panel, Driving Meaningful Digital Strategy. So let's swipe right and begin this discussion. I'd like to invite Pratik Hinduja, Program Head of Digital Media Studies, to introduce the panel.
Thanks a lot, Meena ma'am. Thanks for giving us this opportunity, and thank you everyone for coming, all the panelists and all the attendees. Well, just a quick dawn of light. The last 10 months have been an uphill climb for us, whether it's the digital space, whether it's the finance space, whether it's the full economy within its ecosystem. Something that we would have taken years to get transported to, we got transcended over there overnight. Well, with this transcending space of digital trends, we have a panel who've not only created an entrepreneurial journey, but have also created a flourishing ecosystem within it. I take this opportunity to introduce the panelists, starting with Tanaaz Bhatia, who is the managing director at Bottomline Media Private Limited. She's one who started her journey right from a coffee table and has built an organization to meet the demands and the supply of this ecosystem. Her, her clients vary right from Bollywood blockbusters to luxury brands, digital campaigns, to Coca-Cola, to Airbnb, to MK, to Toads, and everything you name is kind of there within her belly. Next, we have our great Roopak Saluja, who is an Indian media businessman and an angel investor, founder and CEO of 120 Media Collective. He has been featured in the campaign India's A-list most influential people in India's advertising, media, and marketing industry in 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. It's just like how Mercedes would have won all the constructor titles in the last couple of years in Formula One, is exactly how he's been the most influential people in those particular years. Last but not the least, the man who's going to be the showstopper tonight, who's going to shine and going to give us exactly what the creative insight is. None other than Varun, who's the co-founder at Glitch. Through his popular podcast, Advertising is Dead, Varun talks about the changes and development and disruptions in business media world. Content marketing, entertainment, and everything else that's disrupting us is what he dawns light upon. And today, he shall let us know how we go about disrupting the digital world. Over to you, Varun, to take this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Pratik. That was I'd say I can pick up interesting things from each of those introductions, but I think that's a conversation for a different time and a different day. But thanks for that introduction. I think it's an interesting conversation, right? So, hi Rupak, hi Tanaaz. I thought we'll keep this fluid as most of these things need to be, and not make it a game of musical chairs where I will ask each of you the same question and we go round and round with that. Actually, but kind of kick things off, I want to kind of start by asking both of you, because there are two things that have really changed, right, especially in the last year, and the way I see it, is that what we do and how we do it has dramatically changed in so many ways, stayed the same in so many others, which we don't talk about enough. So, if you had to say what has changed and what hasn't, or what would those be? I think we'll start off with that and then we'll go with that. I'll start with you, Tanaaz.
I think what has really changed is that productivity has gone up tremendously. When this whole lockdown and work from home situation happened, initially, I guess like all of us, we were really apprehensive of how is it going to work and can we still continue what we're doing? All of us being in the content space, production, how can you produce interesting content, because we're used to large amount of people on the set with, your actors or whoever it is. But I think we are quite dynamic, as all of us are, and we adapt really easily. And it's all about being fluid and transitioning into one situation and the other. And I guess for me and my team, the most important learning that we figured is, you have to sit on the table, be very flexible to move your ways around. You have to break that little boundary that we all used to be so used to working at. And yeah, I mean, for the first time, I was managing a shoot on a Zoom call. And, with having three people across, and it was something was new, but it still turned out not bad, I would say. But yeah, I think for me, the key takeaway of change would be being flexible and transforming into what is there today and making do with what is the current situation today.
How about you, Rupa?
So, we always prided ourselves as being a very agile company, and agility is actually one of our core values. But what's happened this year is that agility has become table stakes, and everyone is agile, right? And it's absolutely key to have been agile in this entire sort of disruption that happened last year. But as Tanaaz said, I think this whole sort of flexibility of working from home and all of that has really obviously changed the game. And I think that if I look at our businesses, so I am the founder of two companies, but they're really, I would say, three different businesses in that. One, obviously, Varun is like your business, which is Jack in the Box, which is that, as an agency business, we found that productivity did go up, and funnily enough, and people were working from home. And the funny thing is that our lease expired in that business on the 31st of March. And so we were in a very fortunate position. We don't have an office there, and we will not have one for the foreseeable future. We'll see what happens in 2021, but I don't think we're going to go back to a situation where we're going to have everybody in the office every day. So that happened over there. But on the production side of it, so in Bang Bang, we have our commercials production business, and then we have our nascent content development business where we are doing scripted long form premium content, which we're in development with. On the commercial side, exactly as Tanaaz said, that, sitting at home and doing a shoot on Zoom. So that's something that we've seen evolving over the past several months. And in fact, most recently, just at the beginning of the year, we had a shoot where we were actually we were shooting between Bombay and Arizona. In the middle of all of this madness, we actually had 5 people go over to the US and come back just yesterday. And you had, for the first time, 15 clients on shoot, including the MD of a very large MNC, who attended the entire shoot from his living room in Gurgaon. And he was really happy because he hadn't done that for about 15 years or so. And then on the content development side, quite frankly, there hasn't been a better time for content development, because what we've managed to do in terms of a development of slate of projects, we've managed to do in 9 months what ordinarily would have taken 18 months to do, because everyone's sitting in exactly the same positions as we are. And whether you're sitting in Breach Candy or Bandra, LA, Hollywood, or Santa Monica, it doesn't really matter. Everyone's collaborating as if you're sitting in the same room. So that's been great from that perspective.
I'm going to pick up a few things from what both of you said. Right, what I feel has also been interesting is that we always had I'd call a supply chain industrial form of functioning. Is that, go to an office at a certain time, get off at a certain time. Obviously, our jobs never were 9 to 5. I don't think they'll ever be, but there was some form of that. But this flexibility has also evolved. I think the relationships, and it's important, right? It's a relationship you have between client and agency. We've all seen each other in each other's homes. There's a certain humanness to it. Like I have my dog's bed lying here behind me. I just realized after we started. Okay, right. So yeah, those things happen, and I think that's really added to it. And it's also then evolved the way we work. Right. I take back brainstorms as one of the things that has changed, because as agencies, we feel that brainstorms are, how can you do it virtually? And I remember the first month or so, people went around and saying, okay, I'm going to do that. Now I feel it's simpler, because it's like getting on a call, right? And we've learned, but I also feel it's innately changed the functioning of us as professional humans, if that's the term to use, because we're saying, okay, I can get onto a call right now. I can take a half an hour. I can take like a 15-minute break and and hang out with my dog or with someone at home and kind of come back and do this. I can also kind of do stuff individually. We used to have this whole group thing for everything, and every small thing needed a meeting. I feel there are now enough things you can do by yourself, and thankfully we're all saying let's not do a call for this. Let's just do it by ourselves. So I'd actually want to say that what are the aspects do you feel that immediately adapted? Obviously, the production part is something I want to get to, but I'm saying from the strategy part of things, which are the parts that you felt have really changed in terms of just the way even brands are looking at it and what they kind of ask from companies like ours? Rupa?
You know, I think that as far as evolving, just before I get into the side of brands, for example, when you were talking, the only thing I could think of was I love the fact that I can start my day working in the morning and then take a 2 hour break in between where I work out and stuff between 12 and 2, and then I get back to work again, which was sort of something that, because people always say, workout, are you a morning person or an evening person? I wanted to be an afternoon person all my life, but now I can finally do it. Right. So that's the biggest thing for me on a personal front, apart from spending time with the family. But I think in terms of how brands have sort of the expectation from our clients, etc., I think that at one level, there are two conflicting trends I see over here, right? And on one level, it is that everybody expects boundaries have been lost, and people just go on working, and we've all learned, probably, I'm sure all of us have learned how in March and April and maybe even May, you probably had people in your team saying, "Oh man, we're just working way too much now, no breaks, etc." Then we were like, "Okay, fine," and we all started giving those days off in the middle and surprising people with that, and taking 3 days off in the middle for a break or whatever. And then I think we're kind of beginning to find a happy balance over there, and even with clients as well. Even they didn't know how to be remote clients, you know so on that front, I think that we went there and then we came back. But on the other hand, I think that you know this whole point of being able to take a break in the middle and all of that also does help tremendously. But I see the biggest thing that I see as a benefit from all of this is that you can really work from anywhere, and people are now pushing that. So I'm not just talking about a bunch of young people saying I can't be with my stuck in the home with my parents anymore, and then go and try and figure out if they can work from Goa. I'm also talking about hiring people. I mean, we've hired people. We had a designer from Nainital the other day who came with such a fresh perspective, and she's now she's been working with us for about a month now, and it's not something that you would even think of before. So I think there have been a lot of advantages to that, and I think clients are also seeing that, and as you said, also getting to know people a little bit better because of the dog's bed in the background, or because like we have a joke. We had somebody who recently left us after a number of years, and I said, "I'm going to really miss your mother walking in the background," is what I said. So that's the kind of stuff that you see.
I, I think for me it was more of like Roopak said, we got into I think we got into the clients' homes as well. A lot of brands you got to know when they had to take breaks for their kids' exams or whatever they did. But also there was, I mean, I guess there were no boundaries. We were working through the weekends, and what we realized is that we did have to take some time off, and we figured out, like all of us, I guess, some game time with the team and all of that. There has been hiring as well. As Rupak said, I have hired a few people. I have never met them physically. They're virtual hires, and we know them through Zoom. And it's interesting because the only takeaway that when we have our morning call on brainstorming with each other, all of the whole team is, we should definitely meet sometime soon, maybe 2021. We don't know as yet. But uh, I just will take away from one thing Rupert said. His lease expired in 2020. I think mine's expiring in the next 1 month. So there's a big thing that we're deciding whether we should have an office or not. There are a few kids who really want to still come out, and because they live around the office, it's fine. They want to get out. The other ones are very happy being in their hometown, being back with the family. So there are conflicting views, but we are learning to adapt and I guess work the best way. This is, I think, the first time in my 10 years of having the company, I worked till the 31st of December. I had events and shoots 28th, 29th, 30th, and the 31st. And it has never happened to me ever because mostly clients just take off. They don't respond and they're like, oh, let's regroup. And then we had work starting back again on the 3rd and the 4th. So this was the first holiday season, if you put it, where I think even the brands and all of them were bang on and they just wanted to get back into work. So it's been interesting to see the transitions happen.
Uh, I, I think, sorry, just on that point, I think it's an interesting point that you make, Tanaz, because when we were figuring out, and we made a very bold declaration and back in May, yeah, in May 2020, we made a bold declaration that we're not going back to the office. We're not going to be in the office until April 2021 for sure. Okay. What happened after that, we don't know. And at that time, it seemed really bold. Now it's like it's right around the corner, right? And at that point, we took a survey and we found that 50% of people were absolutely thrilled, 25% were ambivalent about it, and 25% really hated it. And I think that there is also this, and I was reading an article more in a European context that said about how there's a classism to it because people who younger kids who live at home, I mean younger people in the workforce who live at home with their parents and all of that, for them, they love their families, but after a while it becomes really not so great. Whereas some of us who are maybe able to have our own room and study and space and all of that, for us it's much better. And then if you're a senior in the organization, you can just call the IT guy and he'll hook you up. That poor guy, the junior account executive is just trying to struggle with his laptop and this and that. So it's also not so, it's not equal for everyone. So I think we've also became sensitized to that through time.
Yeah, speaking of struggle, right? If I look at all the brands and all the categories of of let's say clients that we would end up working with, some could adapt a lot faster to moving to full digital. I mean, we had some brands who were innately digital, so for them it was just like they had to figure out how they work, right? So if someone is, let's say, for instance, so talking about client of ours, like if someone like a LinkedIn didn't necessarily have to change too much about what their product was. The product was digital, but on the other end of the spectrum, if anybody was, let's say, in the movie business where they were actually creating the movie or they're creating a series, obviously worlds kind of like fully changed across the board, and not just change from a creation perspective, it's also from a distribution perspective, right? I mean, how you would traditionally go promoting a movie or would have those legs and events and everything else, and now you're going straight to streaming, which is in many cases almost a dynamic shift, especially for larger pieces. um, what I find interesting is that in two parts. One is people had to move to e-com really quickly. I'd love to hear from both of you what you think that's really changed in terms of how they look at the strategy of what they do. But also on the other end of things, for products that are more content-wise, let's say movies, etc. How is that kind of really shifted out? And just from a strategy standpoint for these brands, I'd love to hear perspectives on both of those.
I'll add in on the movies bit. So we typically do a lot of movie marketing and in-film placement for brands. We had a really tough time because obviously theaters shut down, movie releases got postponed. The larger budget movies still haven't released because there is a fight on whether they do get the same amount of returns on the OTT versus the theaters. We did have some movies getting acquired by the streaming platforms at great pricing, and I think the initial few movies that released didn't really do so well versus what released in the later half of the year. When we had, it was a struggle trying to figure out how to market the movies because there was OTT consumption, which was slowly rising. As Roopak said, some of us were blessed to have great network, 4G, 5G, whatever at home, while the other guys were really struggling to figure out connectivity. And from that perspective, we actually had to think differently on what is the way to market a movie that actually reaches every household so that they'd actually watch it. With the halt in the productions, with the production houses and all of that, the smaller content pieces on the streaming platform started coming out. So you started seeing Z and MX Player and all these guys, releasing great content. And that was consumed fairly quickly because it was shorter formats, people loved it, and they were just bored sitting at home. Uh, when I cut to the movies that released, whether it was the Shakuntala Devi or the OTT show that we had to come up with concepts of why would somebody watch an Amazon versus Netflix show? Why would they watch a Hotstar, which is the Disney Hotstar, is the newbie on the block? So how do you excite someone like creating a red carpet, with actors sitting at home through digital content? It was, I would say it was an evolving process, and with their marketing teams, with the actors also, they've been fairly responsive and worked together with us and the production houses to come up with concepts. So, if you see that Chakuntala Devi, which we did with Ronnie Screwvala's production house, and a couple of others. What we did is try to get brands that were more massy, so that they could connect to people and transition from, maybe, because it's on Amazon Prime, getting the brand to be available on Amazon so that they could directly shop it. So we got Tata, Salt, and a couple of things like that. So the idea was to try and connect it in such a way that it would be a seamless experience. And because all of us still, or used to shop a lot through e-commerce and all our groceries and stuff, we had to find ways that people used anyway through the lockdown, and that would actually amplify or extend them to watching the movie. So we had to find different ways for on the movies bit. When it came to the OTT platforms, marketing those, it's still a challenge, whether it's Amazon or it's Netflix, and the brands or the strategies that you use, it's constantly evolving. Whether it was Family Man or Mirzapur, that we had to come up with ideas with the production houses on how we can actually get the numbers on the day it launches. It's been interesting, and from time to time, I guess we've if we've moved from a scale of 1 to 10 in the first show, we've actually broken barriers and tried to do something else. Whether it means getting a character like Gudu from Mirzapur in every aspect of the brand. So we just took a character and placed him in the adverts of brands across on TV. So that actually made the consumer a little bit more curious on what exactly was going on if they hadn't watched the show, and then they went and watched it. So we've still been trying, and we're still trying new things. So I'm hoping it works out in 2021.
I think at a broad level, it's broadly speaking, it's a positive trend. Why? Because you know stuff can move entirely resting on the strength of the content, much more so than in previous years, right? So earlier, you could have something which was very star laden and pump a lot of marketing budget into it, and by sheer brute force of huge spends, you could get a huge opening weekend, etc. And this is the case not just in India but elsewhere as well, right? Now it's a lot more on the strength of the content. Word of mouth can carry longer. You've got the long tail, etc., and that feeds into Netflix's strategy, etc., as well, right? So I think that overall, in the long run, it bodes well for content per se, which isn't necessarily backed by huge marketing dollars or rupees. I think though that if you look at it, the whole entire entertainment industry has obviously been upended by this, especially with Warner announcing that they're going to put everything on HBO Max, which was like a power move of the century, because that's the only thing they had going for them versus Netflix and Amazon, to make sure that HBO wouldn't actually be a damn squib completely, right? So now HBO Max obviously has a fighting chance and is coming back, and you even had Wonder Woman 84, which released on there at the same time as theaters, wherever theaters were. It's unfortunate that it turned out to be not such a great movie. But that aside, it bodes well for content going forward. And I think that over the past few years, what's been happening is you've got a format and you've got the distribution. And for us, it's been one and the same. And in the past, film meant film. Film meant a 90 to 180-minute piece of content that you watched in where you consumed films, i.e. the theater. Okay. And television meant episodic 30, 40, 60 minutes, whatever it was, which you consumed, which would come via satellite or your cable or whatever it was. Now, finally, those things don't matter anymore, and distribution has been separated from the format, and this is actually going to make it permanent. So, like in many things digital, it took a pandemic to make that happen and to accelerate it. Varun, the other question you asked, which was about brand and e-com, I think the biggest trend that I've seen, and I have been a prime sucker consumer for it myself, is the rise of D2C and the rise and revolution of D2C in India, where you have, for urban India at least, right, where you have the entire consumer journey mapped out from targeting me, and I'm saying me because I fall for it about 3 times a week on Insta with something that speaks to me. So I turned vegan about 14 months ago, going from hardcore meat eater to vegan overnight. And every every week I am targeted by two new vegan products or something, and I buy, and surely it arrives here. Either it's good or not good, and I'll buy it again or not. But I'm falling for it. And this just shows even something like Epigamia, which was retailing all over modern trade, etc. Now I buy online as well. So it's just a revolution of how this stuff can happen now, which is amazing. Again, empowering for the smaller manufacturer, marketer, entrepreneur, trader, etc.
You mentioned epigamy, and that's an interesting example, right? Because I'd had a chat with the CMO on another panel like this a while back, and he mentioned something which I found very interesting. Epigamia would the biggest problem was the fact that we don't have a cold chain in India. Like for us to supply anything which has to be kept at a lower temperature, we don't have a system like that, right? Because traditionally we would not like. What we also realized is many people even switch off the fridges at night in terms of stores. So that's something which these guys had to combat. But they had to do this overnight because, when the pandemic happened. The website was made by one guy in the Epigamia team over like a couple of days in May. So they didn't have a e-com strategy. It happened overnight. Now that's become over 25-30% of their sales, right? So just think about it. Like till May, they didn't even have it, and now it's that. And what I found so interesting about that is that to make that shift, even for they're a new age brand, but even they were predominantly brick and mortar, and so they've moved to this. Um, it's a similar conversation with all brands, right? If you can sell online, you realize the ease of it, and then you also realize that you can track so much more. Like the human to human in physical spaces requires so many elements that can go sideways, that this certainly makes it seem more efficient, even from a marketing perspective, even from like a sales perspective. And it's somehow that completing that chain in my head has made being a marketer, it's almost pushed marketers up a notch, because we finally not just selling the idea or where you can buy it, but we're actually selling you the product and
Absolutely.
seeing you convert it to sale. And that's the most interesting. They're completing their entire chain of, I'm actually getting, till you hit that pay button, we've kind of marketing to you in that sense. And after that, we're telling you what you can buy next. So it's not like we're finishing over there as well. Uh, I wanted to add one more thing to the movie part that you spoke of. There was a Netflix announcement that next year they're doing this year, sorry, they're doing 70 movie releases,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Which for me was a phenomenal number, considering the fact that we would always talk about movies about the weekend box office, and we talk about how collections over the first weekend and all that stuff. Now we're dealing in sheer volume, because now how we're all consuming content is we want, it's almost like before I start watching one series or one movie, I want to know what I'll watch next. So they need to give as much volume as possible. So I guess both from how much do we create perspective and what we create, now it's this mix of niche with mass, and I think blockbusters and niche content will kind of reside together, which makes marketing both really interesting as well.
I guess from one more point, adding on to that, I mean, in the last couple of months, technology also has played a really important part. It's evolved significantly to, artificial intelligence on every product. Even a simple product like first the lens cart used to give you that lens, the option of where you could try the glasses and then buy it. Now, if you go to something like a simple brand, a massy brand like Gillette, it gives you the option to say whether, if you want to keep your beard, and you can see how it looks. And Varun, I'm sure you'll identify with that. And then taking you on to third party vendors who help you with people who have beards. And that goes so on and so forth with different brands across. So it's been interesting to see the evolution. And as Roopak said, I also fall prey to buying all sorts of rubbish online, whether it's through an Instagram ad, but I would say mine is more than 3 times a week. It's pretty much every day when I have 5 minutes looking at it. I do that a lot, but yeah, you experience a lot, and it's really efficient. Some of the stuff comes to you very fast, and they're super quick because if you've not bought it, you get a call back. Okay, you were trying to buy something, but you didn't buy it. What happened? Is something not correct in in our checkout system? And that actually has impressed me tremendously in the last couple of months, and it's pretty cool to
You
see
know,
what's going on.
exactly on that point, just 20 minutes before we started today, I ordered something and I got a message saying it's coming on WeFast. Okay. And while we are talking right now, I've got 7 calls from the WeFast guy, which I'm not answering because he's delivered it downstairs.
That's the power of technology and being connected.
What I feel is also kind of done, which is interesting, is that it's helped someone who might be creating something from their home,
Correct.
sell to anybody across the country. And so everybody's on the same, like a Unilever might be fighting today with someone who's doing something out of his apartment, right? It's a level playing field, and everyone's using terms of sale and performance, and I feel, and that actually brings me to one point which has been in my mind and I haven't fully, is that marketing largely and the whole strategy around it was always a lot about creativity. It's becoming so much about performance and digital transformation and all those things. Um, has the blend changed in terms of, I mean, obviously across category, has the blend changed of how much of, I mean, creativity is a very relative and broad term, right? I think it's, and I have a perspective on the fact that creativity doesn't mean making a TVC, but in general, how has the mix kind of changed in terms of, if I was coming in to be a marketer today, I want to work in this space, how has that my job changed?
Right? I mean, I'll let
No,
Rupert
go
start.
ahead, Tanaz, you go.
No, I mean, I guess creativity is that one thing that can't be digitized or automated. From a point of view, if you're entering the market today on the creative side, it only gives you more access to a lot more ideas, a lot more geographically as well. And I strongly believe, and I've always believed, one idea comes from another, and it's, you build on it and you innovate and you move on. When you do talk to, let's say, these kids who are trying to join in today on creativity, it's they bring actually a very interesting perspective. As you said, people starting a brand from home, they don't think anything is impossible. So their ideas, some of them are so fabulous, and I would say they dream of the stars while talking to you and giving you the ideas, which is kind of great from a perspective. And there is no filter when it comes to creativity. However, with technology being there and you add on to it, with a blend of both, you can create magic. So I'll just give you an example to that. As a company, we also are, I think, probably one of the only companies that we manage the international artists in India, the marketing of it. So we did the first virtual concert with David Guetta and a couple of other artists, sitting out of, I mean, basically we all sitting in our homes, but could access what they were performing through artificial intelligence. And this all was born out of, sitting across the table, sitting across Zoom calls and coming up with a creative idea on live events are no longer happening. How do you, still reach out to people? People love music, it makes them happy. What do you do? So it's actually, how to put it, it's an advent of creativity plus technology being able to reach you and create something fantastic. And I think 2021 will have a lot more of that. At least, I mean, we're hoping to try on that on the music side in India. We've done it internationally, but not here as yet on the music.
I'm of the same opinion. I'm the same opinion as Tanaz, and I would say the way I would say it is that tech, performance marketing, etc., is all becoming table stakes. And yes, there can be incremental differences and competences and all of that, but it's essential. You can't do without it. Okay, so that has to form the base. Creativity, on the other hand, is spontaneous. It's nebulous. Sometimes it's immeasurable and you never know where it can come from and how it can come, and that's always going to be the game changer, right? And if I use another analogy to illustrate what's happened, as somebody who's run a production company for 15 years, back in the day, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13 even, you had a few, let's say a handful, maybe you had 50 new filmmakers emerging in a year at best, right? Of which maybe there would be 10 who would be good, and some would be mediocre, and some not so great, right? And now, because technology has democratized it, it's become a lot more accessible, and anyone can be a filmmaker. And the same analogy applies to DJs and musicians as well, by the way. You've got about 10x that, right? So you've got 500, maybe 1,000 coming up. Okay. Unfortunately, because it's democratized and anyone can do it, 500 are shit. Okay. But out of the other 500, you've got, at least 100 who are really good. So the percentages may not have changed, but the sheer volume has increased because of that democratization. And I think that the same can somewhat be applied to what we're talking about in the case of creativity versus technology / performance / the more sort of rational stuff as well.
Yeah, there's some interesting questions in the Q&A box, right? I was looking at one and I thought that's an interesting one to kind of address is OOH, out of home, was a question in my head at least through 2020, and I was like, okay, we're not getting out of house enough. Is has this kind of changed? My idea on that has evolved, but I'd love to hear, Tanaz, what do you think of what the future for out of home platforms is?
You know, the when we used to originally do the marketing mix of movies or any brand per se, it used to be outdoor, print, and then digital used to be the smallest piece of it. Now, when when we're sitting and planning that, it is no, I would say it's 70% digital. Newspapers is 5%, and out of home maybe not that much, but brands unfortunately still want outdoor, and they do want it even at your on your bus stops and stuff, and those are um, KPIs, I guess, that they need. But I don't think it's going to go away anywhere because we do live in a populous country. And having said that, a lot of people do use public transport. People do still see hoardings and are influenced by it. So I don't think that's going anywhere for sure. But however, the percentage skewed towards each will change once maybe even the vaccine comes out and people start moving out a bit more. I don't know. But I don't see it going anywhere. However, I think there's been a significant decrease with a huge increase in digital spend from our perspective when we work with brands.
Roopak?
Uh, like Tanaz, I think I agree. For the long run, no, it's not going anywhere because we are going to be going out soon enough, whether it is 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is. In the short run, however, it took some serious casualties. I know of, and you may know as well, of there's a fairly large, very prominent, and an agency that was doing quite well, which shut down, privately owned agency, which shut down because their business was largely dependent on out of home. Or either they've shut down or they've shrunk to like a small fraction of their size. But that really hit them badly. So that was immediately a sign of how, one hadn't thought of, because we're sitting inside. It's not like we're walking around looking at them. So in April, May, the last thing that was on one's mind was what's happening with hoardings. But that was what was the wake up call for me. But I think in the long run, no, I don't think it'll change. It'll still very much be there.
Yeah, one of the most interesting startups which I'd heard of in this space, and because I kind of had a chat with them, was a startup which had a product which used the top of Ubers and Olas to which evolved the ad basis the region the car was driving in, and that kept and I kept thinking about, okay, is that the future of out of home? Because you're almost doing programmatic media buying basis GPS location, which for me was like, okay, that's like really interesting to do. So in my head, I mean, for out of home to kind of at least evolve for the future, that seemed like one way to go. But I don't see large hoardings moving across the city, so maybe not that far yet. I'm taking from what you said, Rupak. I think what's interesting is that if any business was not innately digital, even like 20%, 30%, big wake up call, right? Everybody needs to have a sizable amount of any business now in the world connected to digital. Otherwise, you can like get hit hard. I mean, one pandemic, they're saying there might be another at some point of time, so we got to be prepared for the future. And I guess that's the and just to be prepared when saying in terms of prepare to the future, if you have to look at job roles and what kind of jobs and what kind of skills you kind of look at for people moving towards the future, What do both of you feel are the kind of A jobs, but also the kind of skills you really need to be working in the market in this space?
I mean, I don't think the skill set has changed per se. From my perspective, I think you have to love to think, you have to be agile, as Rupert said earlier, which his company has always been. But I think fluid is something that I would put in. You have to be able to transition into a role and be flexible when you're working. Not saying that I've been hired in the sales team and not put in some amount of creativity, because at the end of the day, it has to be a team effort that actually gets you out there. Of course, there will be stakeholders on each of the job roles that you are doing, but I would say adaptive and progressive are my two key qualities that I would look at. And the only one thing I always say, somebody with you have to have common sense and be street smart to be able to adapt in today's situation. Otherwise, you won't survive.
I think it's just sort of further augmented the importance of certain skills that were always necessary to be successful or to be good at your job. Agility and having that adaptability for sure, but also having a growth mindset. Because I think that apart from the fact that we're working from home and all of that, yes, I do believe that there are going to be pandemic-like situations over the next, for there's a it's called a VUCA world, which some of us may be familiar with, but it's basically volatility, uncertainty, something and something. But it's basically the fact that we live in a world which is always changing and can change just like that, as we saw happen. So I think that that growth mindset, ability to learn, ability to adapt is going to be further pronounced for sure. And I think that it also is great because there's never been an easier time to pick up new things, to learn new things. All you need is a mind and the intent to do it. Then the world's your oyster. You have everything available. You can learn anything you want at the touch of a button now. And I mean, and I'm not saying this in a very, oh, look at the time we live in. I mean, especially with specific courses and online education and the way that that has evolved from the early days of, MOOCs to where we are today in terms of everyone having gone that way, including, I think, your higher education brands, which are sort of the gold standard and all that, the way that they're doing it, because they also have to adapt given the way that everything is adapted. I mean, just the fact that, clients who would absolutely not accept, having having, people in other places. I laugh about the fact that when we didn't, back in the day, when we don't have a Delhi office now, but we did for a number of years. But before we set that up, we won pitches and lost them right after because we didn't have a Delhi office. I mean, it sounds so ridiculous now,
I
So all of
experienced that as well.
that.
Same here, same here. Uh, you know, just in terms of skill set, the other thing I feel, and I'm just taking from the location piece, right, is that even as an individual today, you used to always say, okay, I can't work in a space like this because of where I am. I'm not in a city, or maybe my skills. I feel like for every skill set now, geography has kind of become a level playing field. Is that you could work from anywhere with anyone, as long as you do this. So having that set of skill sets is important, but also I feel uh, we speak a lot about specialists. I feel that we need wider generalists who specialize in a few things a little bit. I think that's become more of a need now, especially because now we're having to move beyond so many things that nobody's doing one thing anymore, especially in our space of things. And I feel that having that flexibility to say, okay, today I understand strategy, tomorrow I'm working on, let's say, production. I've had, like, for instance, we've merged post-production and design at Glitch. And one of the reasons we did that is that they started doing stuff which was similar. And at some point, it's just kind of, you're one team, right? So they function almost as a singular unit. So with all that blending in and happening, I feel that you need to have multiple things that you can do. You don't have to, I'm a generalist, so I'm not a specialist in anything. So I believe that you don't necessarily have to be like a deep dive. My dad might not be happy. He's a surgeon, so he'll say specialists are required. But that's at least at least from our side of the world, I feel that you can be a generalist with a little splattering of specialization.
I can totally empathize with you because my brother is an AI scientist, and it's an age-old discussion that we have. I'm like, the world belongs to the generalists. He said, generalists, you guys know nothing.
I know Pratik wants to pull in a couple of questions, and so I'm going to just have him pop in at this point.
Well, thanks a lot. But before we get into the summary of things, there are students who are posting questions in the Q&A and waiting in the Zoom to ask you all a question. The very first one is coming from Sonal Rati, who is our postgraduate digital and media advertising student. She is going to be directing a question to Roopak Saluja. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So my question is for Mr. Roopak Saluja. So as we all know that you're an angel investor, I would really like to know that what is that one thing that you can't unsee or actually look for while investing in a startup company?
Good question, Sonal. And actually, this is a question that people try to answer. It's probably the most important question to answer, obviously, to make sure that your angel investments go well. And even though you might identify that one thing, that's not always the case. But if I really had to pick one thing, would it be, if you had to choose among a few different things, is it product, idea, execution skills, team, product market fit, etc.? Really, if you forced me to choose one, it would be team. And that's because you pivots happen all the time. And Varun, actually, I'm laughing at Varun because I was on his podcast once, and that was the subject. I think it was even called pivots. My
Yeah.
episode was called pivots, or had the word pivots in it, right? So, but it's not that you have to keep changing your mind about what you're doing, but things change. I mean, you could have a great business idea, raise money, and be on the way to the beginning of success, and then a pandemic could hit. Then what? Right? So you have to just be agile, change. If you're not digital, go digital. If you're not, e-com, go e-com, all of that kind of stuff. So I think having the right team that can actually do things and has the ability and the agility to maneuver their way around, especially, again, I use the term, in this VUCA world, in an uncertain world, that is probably the single most important factor, more important than having the right product, even, because the product might become irrelevant.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think the picking point out there is if you're a young entrepreneur out there, you need to know how to pivot at all given points of time. The next question is from Adya Srivastav. She would be directing this question to Tanaaz. She is a postgraduate in digital marketing and advertising student. Over to you, Adya. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. First of all, a very good afternoon, ma'am. It's been awe-inspiring listening to you on this panel. And as you mentioned earlier, Bottomline Media has completed a decade now in the marketing industry. So what is that one thing or one trend, according to you, that you've noticed has changed and keeps changing with every season? And does the seasonal change then in turn affect the personnel hiring that you do for your company, which we all know is an all-women workforce? And that's so does that change anything for you?
When you say decade, it makes me sound really old, but yeah. So, I think what is constantly change is being able to think out of the box. And people, brands, whoever you work with, nobody is really averse to any idea. So there's no wrong idea as such. And from a perspective of being able to change, maybe 9 years ago, when we started off with a McDonald's meal for marketing a movie, which was unheard of. Now that's the most done thing. While today you're taking something totally different, where somebody put up a question about memes as marketing of movies, where somebody used it for Coolie #1. That's another tool that you use for marketing. So the idea being is you have to constantly innovate and start thinking of different things. You can't really repeat yourself again and again because people get bored. All of us in this panel itself, and each one of us, if we feed you the same thing every day at home, you're definitely not going to eat it. You need variation, and you need something that will you'll actually pick up and take notice. From a hiring perspective, um, I mean, I pretty much stick with the same thing. Yes, it's important that you're a good student, but from a perspective of when I hire people, like Rupert said, when he does his angel investing, it's the person and their attitude and what they bring to the table. For me, persistence and somebody who's dead on determined and willing to learn is far better than somebody who has superb amount of experience and a chip on their shoulder. So from my perspective, that really works.
This really helps. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Adia. Thank you, Tanaz. We have the next question from Ishita. She would be directing a question to Varun. She's a student at Postgraduate Management and Business and Entrepreneurship. Please go ahead, Ishita.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. So, my question for you today, Mr. Varun, is you have some of the best brands in your roster, with every brand being unique from one another. What are the key things that you consider while devising strategies for all your brands?
Um, we actually start. I mean, one of the base things is all businesses come to an agency to kind of solve their business problems, right? So understanding that problem is core to what we do. And while there are commonalities, right, you try to find. There is no one size fits all. There is no, so our systems aren't built to say, okay, this is how we work. It's about saying, how do you need us to work?